Hi, my name is Rob Ryder, speaking out of Cornwall. So this is a video regarding a new book I've got out with Patrick. So I just want to revisit a previous book I did with Patrick, A Conscious Humanity, Morality, Freedom and Natural Law. So the object of that book was really to get people to see through the illusion of the political world. So I always say a lot of times that you have the geographical map of the world with the laws of nature, and the political map, which is an illusionary map. It doesn't exist objectively in the real world, with man-made laws that vary depending on which country you're in. That being a dictatorship, a religious dictatorship, a democracy, whatever. They're all different. And the only thing that's actually objectively real is nature's laws. And I believe that, like Mark Passio states, that objective morality is real. It's not subjective. But then you have to say, well, what do you mean by that? So we manifest that in English culture as common law. Do no harm, cause no loss. You could even simplify that, as we're going into the next book in a minute, which is about energy, as playing a harmonic, beautiful tune, rather than taking an instrument and playing an out of tune melody that causes pain in the ears. Then nature, I believe personally, always wants to play the harmonic, beautiful tune. But with human beings, with our conscious mind, which I've said in other videos, I believe was the downfall of man, the opening up of the conscious mind, the ego. And you go to the Garden of Eden of the tree of life, of knowledge of good and bad, represented natural law. And the ego felt, oh, I know better than you. I know better than which created me. And a lot of people say in the spiritual world, well, without the good, with the good, you have to have evil. With that, there's light. With good, there has to be bad. I don't believe that is absolutely true. I think in a seed of an oak tree, and again, we'll come back to this, the new book in a second, there's the potential for it to grow into a beautiful, strong oak tree. But there's also a potential for it to be weak and decay. And it depends on the information that comes into it, that feeds it. I believe the universe, nature, wants strong oak trees. I don't think it will weak ones. But circumstances can allow that, because everything's searching a balance, even though we might not see it all the time, but it is searching a balance. And things that decay need to be recycled. If they're not in balance, they're breaking down, they're recycled. And the human mind is completely out of balance because the ego thinks it knows better than nature itself, and it's playing a pretty bad tune. So the first book was basically to see beyond the illusion of the political system, and that the political system has been hijacked for a long time, and organized religion and political systems have been there to manipulate the consciousness of humanity so we can be controlled. It's kind of like Brave New World social engineering with the Orwellian big stick when needed. So that was kind of the point of the first book. This new book now, so it's called The Universe and I, My Role in the Unfolding Energies of Life. So Patrick Quanton. It says with Rob Ryder, because the story behind the book was I was just having a bit of fun. I thought, right, I might write a book about the human condition, all the strange and funny things we do. That was the initial idea. And I had a bit of a book plan set up. I thought, oh, you could have a bit of fun with this. And I contacted Patrick to see if he wanted to do a couple of chapters. But after, I think, one or two chapters, it just reminded me of the seminar that Patrick came over for a year or so ago, and the 13 conversations after it. And the reason I asked him to come over to do the seminar, and I went out of the way to try my best to get a decent quality recording, and we did our best with the conversations afterwards with, technical limitations, shall we say. And the idea was to see life as an energetic process. I don't know anybody who's talking about this information like Patrick at all. I think people have got bits of it, but to put it together in one complete package, I don't know anyone who's talking about this and who genuinely, at least, he feels he understands it. You know, it's your opinion whether he's right or wrong, but at least I know he feels he understands it in his own mind. And so I wanted to get this understanding of what do we mean, because in the so-called alternative health, a lot of it's still materialistic thinking. And there's a progress, we've all been through it. You go and looking after your diet, then you look into supplements, you might look into different therapies, but they're all external things. And nobody's really talking about a life balance, at least not in a detailed way, as what I've gone through with Patrick. And I think it's not a coincidence that on this channel, the biggest, which I'm happy about, the biggest viewings for the series was the formation of a human being. Because it's formed by an energetic process, which, you know, go back to that video to see what that means. That understanding is in this new book. Because unless we start to see life as an energetic process, life as wanting to obtain balance, what does balance actually mean? We're never truly going to be healthy. Now, consciously, we don't need this knowledge. It's within us. Animals know what to do. That's why you don't really see chronic illness in nature. It's acute illness, and then they know what to do. They rest, they sleep. They've been attacked, they get over the trauma of the attack, and the gazelle might learn not to go at that watering hole at a certain time. Things in nature, they don't need this conscious knowledge, they just know. But human beings with our conscious mind, that's taken over society for a very, very, very long time and been manipulated, we're completely lost. And that deep inner knowledge isn't being tapped into. So I think we need to understand this more. Now, it's a very difficult subject to explain, and yet it's something innate in us that we don't need to consciously understand. But because we're so messed up, humanity, we need to consciously look into this logically, understand it, to then forget it, which is where I'm kind of at. I just can't remember anything nowadays, simply because nothing seems relevant. Because once you know you're being manipulated in the world by dark entities, should we say, you don't need to know anymore. You know enough to know, you know their tactics, you know what their game plan is, then you don't need to know, because then you'll have an internal balance that knows when it's being manipulated. You don't have to think anymore, you just have a knowing. And it's the same with health. You don't need to logically know everything. So you need to get in touch with that internal unconscious knowing. And this is kind of the challenge of the book. So I said to Patrick, you know, we need to really actually put this down once and for all, and then we can let it go. So that was the idea of the book. So the universe and I. So the idea of the book was it's about you as an individual, because we're a collective humanity, but it's made up of individuals. And we'll never get anywhere trying to go out there changing everybody, forcing new ways of thinking onto people. That's what the system does. The only ever change, what I would perceive as positive change for humanity, which will expand freedom, will be the individual making changes en masse, individuals en masse. For individuals en masse to make these changes, if they're not connected internally already, then they're going to need this type of information to go back into themselves. So the subtitle is My Role in the Unfolding Energies of Life, is because, as we'd mentioned in the series, everything comes from what we would call a seed. So there's the seed. It's very, 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 very condensed information. Imagine that's an acorn seed. Within the seed, there's no time and space or life, because there's no movement. It's solid, should we say, fixed, very fixed information. that has a potential to be an incredibly strong and beautiful oak tree. So the potential is in the seed. So the universe came from a seed that wanted to unfold itself and fulfill its own potential, which would be the strongest, more beautiful presentation it can within what it's got. And the universe is in an environment. Just as the acorn comes out, it has the potential to be this beautiful, strong, powerful oak tree. But depending on the influences in the environment and how it's fed, it could be weak, diseased, and fragile. And unfortunately for humanity, we're feeding, shall we say, diseased, unbalanced energy to ourselves. That's what actually, that is what it is, you could say, contagious. Our feeding ground for ourselves, individually and collectively, is toxic. So we have the potential to all be strong, independent, powerful, unique human beings, but we're being fed toxic energetic waste deliberately, and we're perpetuating it with our ignorance, our own ego, and so we're not reaching our potential. And this is why I don't believe, like a lot of people say, well, there's light, so there has to be dark, and there's goodness, so there has to be evil. In my opinion, they don't have to be evil. Everything that's created comes from creation itself. So if you want to use the word God, then evil is a manifestation of God. And people say, oh no, that's not how it, well, it has to be, because everything comes from creation. There's nothing outside of creation. Everything is an expression of creation. So if you want to say creation and creator is the same thing, therefore God, then evil has come from God. But I don't believe that just because there's good in the world, there has to be bad. I think it's all a potential. I think the natural state of the universe, of creation, you could say how God wants to express himself, itself, is to be a beautiful, balanced entity. But with the human being, we have this thing, conscious mind, and this thing called free will, that again has interfered with that because we think we know better. So I don't think it has to be this way, that there has to be good and dark. I think everything is a natural expression of what's fed it. We don't have to continue to feed toxicity into our development. And that's when it comes down to an individual choice then. How are you going to feed yourself? How are you going to feed the environment around you and other people around you energetically with your behavior? And yes, actions speak louder than words, as we mentioned in the book. So you have to start sending out upbuilding energies and also feeding yourself, which means there's a saying in this world now we call the blue pill and the red pill. I can't remember which is which, but they say another one that's come out recent years is the black pill, which I get that people become so absorbed in the dark side and they fall into that rabbit hole and don't come out. Once you know it exists and there it has a plan to manipulate it, you don't need to take part in that anymore. Focus on the light because it will outshine the darkness. Like I say, I don't believe just because there's light in the world there has to be darkness. It's a choice. Depends how we feed the system, feed ourselves, feed whatever's around us. We collectively can grow into a huge, powerful, strong, elegant oak tree. Or at the moment, it looks like we're decaying to a diseased oak tree. But I also believe that within the seed of humanity, it's going somewhere and it's more powerful than what we want to do. So it'll push through us, it'll push through our consciousness to become this powerful oak tree. Will it be in my lifetime? I don't know. Doesn't look like it at the moment, but we can all play our role in changing the feeding ground. And ultimately, it's a choice. It's a consumer's choice. Do we want to continue on this path of darkness or lightness? but you can only contribute a small bit to the likeness. It's a small bit. And in this book, we go through things like, it's like the book of know yourself. You have to know what information created you as an individual. So you go back to the videos on conception and the formation of a human being. What energies created me as an individual? How do I see myself in the world? What do I choose, whether I'm aware of it or not, choose to focus on in life? Am I feeding myself with positive stuff or negative stuff? So you have to be conscious of all this. In cellular life, we know that cells are attracted to nutrition and repelled by toxicity. But with human beings, and that's an instinctive knowing. With human beings, again, the conscious mind, how do we perceive it? We perceive things a certain way. So it's not ultimately objective, it's quite subjective as well. And we can get drawn into things that are actually quite toxic for us. There's another saying that, every decision we make is the closest to what we perceive as good for us and furthest away from what we perceive as bad. And yet people get hooked on drugs, go through addictions, whatever. But obviously in that moment of taking your drug or your drink, or in that absolute moment, the pain of not taking it is more than the pain of taking it. So we're always trying to, even alcoholics, drug addicts, whatever, they're always trying to get to the least painful choice. So we're all instinctively trying to feed ourselves. And then we have a thing that, the old saying of judging people's behavior, not the person. If all behavior is in balance with how an individual sees that moment in time, then it's the consciousness behind that behavior, not the behavior. So yeah, we can only judge the behavior, but we can't judge the person behind it because we don't know. The only thing you do know, and even then that's just a little bit, is our own minds. That's what we need to start to learn to get. So the idea of the book is that basically we change the feeding ground of humanity energetically and with our behavior. Start to see life as an energetic process. Try to identify reaction patterns. Your responses to life. Are you just reacting, or are you consciously responding? Because you have reaction patterns that may not be beneficial anymore, but you can consciously change them. Because as they arise, you can change it stop it and see what else comes up. So it's hard work. This book is about your own internal work. It's about getting to know yourself. Yeah, we know the whole world's being manipulated, but a lot of that's beyond our control. We can only provide our own contribution to the feeding ground of humanity. And don't think that your tiny little contribution isn't important, because making the world a better place will only happen by millions of people making tiny contributions. It's the only way it will happen. Every empire that's fallen and one that's come along, probably the same people, but it's another form of a dictatorship. Another person, I know better, we'll do it better this time. We need a massive conscious awakening, but it has to be started from individuals. And the idea of this book, again, this book was to just give people information and seeing life as an energetic process. All these energies and possibilities unfolding. But with human beings, we have some kind of choice. Sometimes it's hard to get off that path we're on, especially we go into trauma like we did in the episodes, how you've been built and a life path that you've been on continually for a long time, and it's become just a hardwired pattern of being, which isn't good for you. It's not easy, but you have to get off that path if you want to enjoy life a little bit better. The more as you get off those paths and come onto better paths, the better the world world will be. It's as simple as that. You know, Mark Passio has always said, you know, more morality equals more freedom. Less morality, less freedom. So the fact that our freedoms are being stripped away, it's really nothing got too much to do with the people who are doing that. It's to do with the human collective have become immoral and chosen ignorance, pure ignorance, chosen ignorance, cowardice, laziness. These are all, you could say, acts of immorality, because the consequences of those states of being a lack of freedom. Morality starts with consciousness. You have to become conscious of what's going on. That was the point of the first book. Then you have to make a conscious effort to try and make your life better, the life around you better. You can only do that in your own community. So it's irrelevant what's going on in other parts of the world beyond me. Not relevant at all. My own little community bubble, that's where I can make a difference and spread decent energy around. And so the idea of the book is to see life and health as an energetic process, and we finally found a way of putting that into words so people will hopefully understand it more and take a bit more self-responsibility, and maybe focus a little less on all the negative that's happening in the world and feed ourselves with a bit more positive energy.